Good evening, everybody. That was magic. We just had to stop thinking about starting the evening, and you all went silent. So, I really hope you're going to enjoy this evening. We're going to be talking about early stage investing, which is something that I'm sure many of you have heard about. The great thing about tonight is we're going to be able to talk about that from an experience point of view, because Enterprise Angels and others have been at this for over 10 years now, so we should be able to start to be able to talk about it in some detail, and that's what we'll do tonight. Give you a real feel for how it's gone and the lessons we've learned. However, for the entrepreneurs in the evening, in the room tonight as well, KPMG, Tracy Preston-Lett will be talking about research that KPMG has done on entrepreneurs in startup businesses, and she'll be talking about the results from that research and sharing that with us tonight as well. So this is something that KPMG and Enterprise Angels are trialing. We did this in Hamilton a week ago and Tauranga tonight, and we're considering rolling this out through KPMG offices throughout the country. And the purpose of that is really just to introduce early stage business investing to a wider group of people than just angel investors. Okay, with that, Tracy, would you like to
Sure.
kick us off with that? You've got that. You're armed and dangerous.
Yes, we got the technology to work just in the nick of time, as always. So, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to KPMG. I'm very aware that there's an election debate at 7 o'clock tonight that I'm pretty sure everybody's interested in. So to keep me on track, I'm going to stick to my notes in terms of moving things through. So, and there'll be a bit of tooting out there because there's national, and I was like, there was lots of tooting before, and I was like, well, there's obviously support for national. So KPMG are passionate supporters of the angel investment sector and enterprise angels specifically. We feel a real connection with the entrepreneurial spirit that is inherent in this sector, and we just love seeing businesses grow and prosper. There is a lot to love about the opportunities that you see. On the flip side, there is a lot to learn from the times that they fail and on occasion can break your heart. Today you are going to hear about angel investing, and you will no doubt hear about some of the particular things for you to consider in this sector, such as ownership of IP, competition, markets and the likes. I'm going to take a slightly different tact and talk about some of the things that we observe at the early life stages of successful startups. All companies have a business life cycle, from startups to mature companies, or as we like to say, from seed to speed. Each stage presents its own set of opportunities and challenges. We've done a lot of research in New Zealand about what makes successful companies tick at every stage of this life cycle. We've even written a report, and it also has some great local success stories in it. Today I'm going to talk to you about the traits that as investors you should look at in early stage life cycle startup businesses. These are the traits that we believe set successful businesses apart and ideally are found in the DNA of a business. Now, and you will hear this no doubt from others, there is certainly no guarantee of success in this sector. There are angel businesses that exhibit these traits and then fail regardless. It's tough. If you're thinking about investing in this sector, then you need to have your eyes wide open. If you can identify these traits in the startups that you consider investing in, or if these traits are lacking and you can help introduce them, because don't forget, startups are not just about your cash, they are also about experience and guidance, then we reckon it certainly can't hurt. First, let's agree on some things. New Zealand is a nation of private business owners, large and small. New Zealand's many private businesses drive growth and are the foundation of our country's long-term success. NZX listed companies and large corporations receive most of the attention in the media, but 2/3 of our economic output comes from private businesses, and they are the cornerstone of employment in New Zealand. And by the way, this is not sheer luck. New Zealand is a great place to do business, a rare combination of true entrepreneurial spirit, a free market economy, and a country that embraces innovation provides a great environment for businesses to prosper. Further, constraints to trade are low, regulatory and operating environments are generally fair and allow for growth, and we can be competitive while still attracting a premium price for our products. And prosper is something that we have aspirations to do, particularly entrepreneurs. So let's narrow down on the stage in the business life cycle we are here to learn about, and that's the starting stage. This is the stage where entrepreneurial ideas turn into business reality. It is the time where the learning curve is perhaps steepest, where entrepreneurs are sometimes failing and getting back up again. And they do this because they have a passion and the drive to create a better something, solve a problem, create an app, a product, a disruptor. The kind of things we see as critical at this stage is cash flow management, business planning, revenue, ownership structures, and finding talent to take them to the next phase. Businesses that successfully move out of this phase have built a strong foundation, surrounded themselves with the right people and advice, and are preparing themselves to grow. Because to be successful, grow they must. Growing is where potentially a single entrepreneur with a great idea moves to a stage where they have products, employees, investors, markets, revenue, and of course expenses. Basically, things just got real. This is an interesting time for an angel investor as the dream is starting to turn into something more real. But it is also potentially an expensive time. Marketing is costly, teams are costly, expansion is costly, but these are all necessary parts of this phase. After growing comes strengthening, where businesses are looking to improve operations and minimise their risks. This is where businesses are reaching maturity, and for startups may be quite a long way into the future. It is an interesting one for many of the types of businesses that come through the angel sector, as some can tend to jump quicker to the final phase, transitioning or preparing to exit. Regardless, as an investor in the sector, you need to be very clear of what the exit plan is, as this is likely where you realise your gains or your losses. Let's narrow the focus even further and talk about the DNA traits that we see as being critical at the starting phase. And it starts with pivotal leaders. This is the person that has driven the business from inception. Ideally, this person has the vision, passion, and industry experience combined with strong commercial focus. Sometimes in the startup phase, they may have the vision and the passion and be lacking in commercial focus. This person is the heart and soul of the business and likely to be hugely emotionally and financially invested. Many people say that in the angel space you invest in the people. Well, this is the person that you are likely investing in. There are some watch outs. All that investment can sometimes make them less objective. All that passion and self-belief may come across pretty strong. They are likely to want to drive and control all aspects of the business, and this may compromise your ability to provide value, to develop that mentoring relationship, and for others to perhaps feel part of the team. Ambition and attitude is often articulated by entrepreneurs as a determination to make a difference in the world. Rarely do entrepreneurs with the right kind of ambition and attitude talk about being their own boss or creating their own job. This is the realm of traditional small business owners. Very few entrepreneurial leaders we talk to identify money as their ambition. Financial success is seen as a byproduct of the original mission. There is likely to be a view of either join in or get out of the way. It is interesting that sometimes we see a reluctance from Kiwi entrepreneurs to actually desire to be globally competitive. And whether it's something to do with more reserved, humble Kiwi attitude, or that maybe Kiwis see the heights of success as buying the typical material things like property and cars, we think that perhaps we can all aim higher. Capable people is the last DNA trait I will talk about today. In the early stages of an entrepreneur's journey, there's often a heroic quality to the task. Often, they are the only one that can see the future. They are visionary. They are often cash-strapped, so they actually have to do everything themselves. They are hard-working to the point that they may be unbalanced in their lifestyle. But actually, there's not much that can be done to change that in the very early stages. But an early warning sign for investors is just how long this situation lasts. Because entrepreneurs that progress beyond 1 or 2 people operations must be able to attract capable people. In the startup phase, this may happen in 2 ways, either through early hires or advisors. In respect of early hires, the quality of the first few staff says a lot about the company's ability to get beyond the founder and to continue to hire and, more importantly, retain great talent, especially as it moves from startup phase and enters the growing phase. Quality professional advisors. All good entrepreneurs will surround themselves with a formal or informal board, professionals and mentors. What's more, they will actually listen and take on some of the advice. So with that thinly veiled plug for KPMG as advisors, I will hand you back to Bill. But before I do, I have one final message. This sector is really exciting and energising. There are lofty highs, but there are also sometimes disappointments. If you are considering investing in startups, take it upon yourself to get informed. Listen to the success stories and listen to the war stories. Talk with real-life investors. Enterprise Angels is a really great organisation to be part of, and we have an impressive network of members in this region who collaborate strongly together, and there's absolutely an abundance of opportunities to invest in. So good luck. And I'll pass you back.
That's great. Thanks, Tracy. Yep. So let's go on from there. We're now going to talk and focus a bit more on investors. So tonight, and just to give you a sense how long this is going to take, 20, 25 minutes, all up my talk and the fireside chat. Then we've got drinks and nibbles, which we hope you'll stay behind for. I'll touch on the basics. I know there's some Enterprise Angels members in the room. Bear with me, guys and ladies. But there's a lot of people here who don't know much about the angel space. So we're just going to touch on some of the basics of early stage investing. Then we're going to talk about performance, some of the early indications that we have of how we're doing financially in the investments that we're making. I'll then tell some war stories, because everyone always loves war stories. So we got 3 companies that I'll highlight. We'll then have a fireside chat with Bruce Bartley, an Enterprise Angels member, and a whole lot more, which you'll see when we bring up his slide. Fireside chat just means I get Bruce to come up here, sit down with me, and I ask him some questions and get him to respond to you, which is a nice, relaxed, informal way of conveying information. And then finally, how you, or if you're representing clients tonight, how you might get involved in early stage investing. So what is it? If we, as far as an investment class goes, well, early stage investing falls into what's described as the alternative asset class, which includes venture capital and private equity. And you can think about those in terms of stage. Early stage investing is companies that are pre-VC. VC is pre-private equity. Early stage investors typically invest $1 million, $2 million in a company. VCs 5 to 10 million, private equity 10 to 20 or more. Very rough, but just to give you a feeling for the stages. It is high risk, but it is potentially quite rewarding, and you'll see that when we talk about some of the performance. It's engaged investing. When I talk to the best of financial advisors, they will tell me honestly that they have an awful lot of clients that are really bored with what they can put them in. And that is the listed market and the clients themselves will probably have some investment or exposure to the property market. And a lot of people are looking for more stimulation, in particular if you have a real interest in investing, and in particular an interest in or a background in business. This type of investing, early stage investing, is very engaged investing. You get to know the company that you're investing in as much as you want. And so you're right there, very close to the company, you're close to the entrepreneur, and you get to really live the journey to a much more of an extent than you do simply reading reports on how your listed investments are doing. So if that's something that you're interested or stimulated by, then this kind of investing definitely can deliver that. It is disciplined investing. I really do want to emphasize that. When early stage investing, angel investing started in New Zealand 10, 11, 12 years ago, we were really just learning the ropes. We lent heavily upon those that already knew about investing, such as our partnership with Craig's, but we had a lot of learning to do in the early days. We now apply the best practice approach we possibly can to every single investment we make. That means full due diligence, investor protective terms, legal documentation, and equally important as all of that, post-investment management. We don't just invest and turn our backs on these investments. Many of these investments, we will actually put an investor director into the company, and that company will report back to us at least on a quarterly basis. So we're actively involved in, believe it or not, the nearly 70 companies that Enterprise Angels is invested in. We're actively involved in about a third of those where we have investor directors directly involved in those companies. It is focused on exit. If you're used to investing for a dividend return, that does happen in the early stage space, and some of the companies we're invested in will deliver and are delivering dividends, but the vast majority of them, our money day is when the company is sold or acquired. These are young companies, and if they really have what it takes to get onto the world stage, someone a lot bigger with deeper pockets than us is going to have to take on the journey of funding them to go forward. So it's an exit that we're looking for, and that usually returns us our money. It is illiquid. There is a secondary market that's developed around our funds. So if you're a limited partner investing in one of our funds, there are others that will potentially buy you out of the fund or a portion of it if you want. But generally, if you're investing directly into a company, you can get out quite easily if the company's doing really well. If the company's not doing really well, I sometimes describe it, even to my wife, as being more than a marriage. You are along for the ride, and and here we all go. But one of the wonderful things about early stage investing, particularly if you do it as an angel investor, and that's not necessarily the way everybody wants to do it, is that you've got plenty of company on the ride. A lot of people you can brainstorm about how we can turn this thing around. And last but not least, it's important. Everybody that's involved in early stage investing is involved in it, not just for the financial return. It's important for our regions, it's important for the country, and if you want to make a difference in a business investing in economic development way, there's very few ways you can do that more than through this kind of investing. It is really important investing. So who are these early stage business investors? Well, they're potentially everybody here in this room. To define them, you have to qualify as a wholesale investor. So the Financial Markets Conduct Act defines who these investors in the early stage market can be, and that means you're either wealthy, meaning you have $5 million or more in assets, but that means everything: trusts, companies you may be involved in, everything that's associated with your wealth. So $5 million or more in assets, and or you're experienced in investing or business. So if you have managed your own investment portfolio or worked with your advisor to manage, not simply been passive, if you have a wealth of experience in business as well, those can also qualify you as a wholesale investor. And the reason why you have to qualify as a wholesale investor is we don't, none of the companies that approach us prepare full prospectuses as they have to do if they're a listed company. These companies provide information memorandums, business plans, financial projections, all of which we do due diligence on, but they don't give all of the protections and all the information that you'd get if you're investing in a listed company. So, so you need to understand investing in business in order to, or have wealth in order to invest in the space. You need to build a portfolio. If you're seriously wealthy, and we do certainly find these people out there, if you're seriously wealthy and you just want to invest in 1 or 2 or 3 early stage businesses, go for it. The likelihood of you losing all your money is very, very high. If you invest in our space, if you invest in 10 companies, the law is, and it's proving to be true, the law is you lose all or most of your money on half of those investments that you make. And so you're looking to make up your money on the other half. And within that other half, 1 or 2 of them will return 1 or 2 times your money, and a couple of them a little bit more than that. And you're hoping within that portfolio to have one that really does very, very well, a 10 times or more return on your capital invested. That makes it work from a financial and investing point of view, and I'll be talking more about that when we talk about performance. You won't want to allocate any more than 5 to 10% of your wealth to this asset class. It is illiquid, it is high risk, it has to be the kind of money that if you lost it all, we would not have your wife on the phone to us, or on the phone to you, or anyone else, or your husband. It really has to be discretionary money. That's the way to look at it. And how might somebody be involved in the early stage space? Well, there's 3 primary ways. One is a passive investor, investing through something like one of our funds. And by that, what I mean is our funds, the EA Fund 1, 2, and EA Fund 3, which will be launched early 2018, they invest alongside the Enterprise Angels members in those same deals that the Enterprise Angels members do and have done due diligence on and are investing in. So the fund invests alongside the members. So if you invested in the fund, you would get 15 to 20 companies that you're invested in. For a $30,000 investment, that's what the minimum was in EA Fund 2, you would get a spread of 15 to 20 companies. In fact, EA Fund 2, I think, will be 20 companies. So that gives you that all-important portfolio spread. If you feel like, look, this is a really interesting space, but I really don't have the time, I'm not really that interested in knowing that much about the individual businesses, then that's an approach that you can take. Direct investing is another approach. So you might say, well, I like to pick the companies myself that I invest in. You can do that by simply logging on to Angel Equity, which is our online platform. Nearly all of the Enterprise Angels investment opportunities and investment opportunities from other angel groups and investors around the country get listed on Angel Equity. And as a wholesale investor, you can invest in those opportunities. So you can sit at home and you can look at the opportunities we invest in, and you can invest in them as well. Or the other option is you can join an angel investment group. And in this area, in the Waikato, it's Enterprise Angels. And the difference there is you would be sitting just like you are now, and I would be an entrepreneur pitching to you for investment funds. So it's a more direct way of being involved. You might decide to join a due diligence team and actually have a closer look at the opportunity. And when you invest, you'll know other people who are investing, and you can talk to them about, why they've made the decision that they've made, et cetera. So it's a way of being even more engaged than simply investing directly or as a passive investor. Right, so let's talk about performance. 15% of Enterprise Angels companies have realized. As I mentioned before, we're somewhere between 65 and 70 companies invested. I think as of today, Jimmy, we're 67. So 15% of our companies have now realized. Not unrealized, but realized. In other words, return cash to us or not. We've had 4 exits. Exits are really, really a great word in our world, because exits means money back to us. And of those 4 exits, we have averaged a 2.5 times return. So if you were invested in those 4 companies, you'll have got a 2.5 times return on your money. For every dollar you put in, you got $2.50 back. Great. We've also had 6 write-offs. So if you are fortunate or unfortunate enough with your portfolio to have invested in 10 companies and you invested in those 4 and those 6, you would, depending upon how much you had invested in them, probably be underwater at the moment. So that's the history of Enterprise Angels. That's the number of companies that have realized to this point. In EA Fund 1, which is a good way of seeing how we're doing overall, because EA Fund 1 is invested in 15 companies. EA Fund 1 has a 28% unrealized value increase. So for every dollar that you put in, it's now worth $1.28. However, it is unrealized. This is not cash back to us. And you might think, well, how are you increasing the value of these companies? How do you do that? Well, we follow the NZVCA valuation rules, and the only time that we increase the value of the companies is when they go out to market and they raise more capital on a higher valuation. So they're doing really well. They need more capital. They go back to the market for it. They say, the value of the company now has doubled since the last capital round. We're raising money on that. And if the market responds and says, great, here's $2 million, then that's the new value for that company. So that's typically how those values go up. That equates to a 15% internal rate of return. Our target rate of return is 22%. Recent statistics and studies that have come out of the US are talking about a 22% internal rate of return. Historically, years ago, 5, 6, 7 years ago, it was 27% was the target internal rate of return. But that's more typical at this point.
Bill, does time have anything to do with IRR? No.
Yeah, it's all, time is really the critical
So the
thing.
longer it takes, the less the return.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And if I get any really difficult questions on some of that stuff tonight, I've got 2 people in the room that I can draw on. Right. So that's. Let me just make sure I didn't skip a slide there. Let's dig down a little bit deeper and let's look at the portfolio of an actual Enterprise Angels member. And because I couldn't ask any member to put up theirs, this is mine. Warts and all. So I've been at this investing now for, let's see, 6 years, probably 7 years. And so let's just walk through a bit of it. First of all, here's the amount that I've invested. Now, that's not necessarily the amount that I invested initially. Oftentimes it's more than that, because one thing that you'll come to realize in this space is these companies really love us. They just come back to us again and again for more money. They just can't get enough of us. So when companies are doing well, you do have the opportunity to invest further in them, and I have done that in many of the instances here. So Balex Marine, which I'll talk about in more detail, Beanie, which Bruce is the director of, you'll see 5,000. If you look down here, you look at the amounts. That's my investment into EA Fund 1. It's a $25,000 investment, $2,000 yet to be called. If you look down here, you'll see the amounts that are being invested, and you might think, oh, that's a relief. These people aren't squillionaires. They're not investing $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 per deal. Well, you can do that if you're seriously wealthy, but if you're going to be investing in 10 or 20 of these companies, well, you need to have a lot of money to be investing that sort of amount. And so you can see here, that's not what I do, what I've been able to do. Some of these have gotten away a little bit on me, particularly the ones that are in hibernation or liquidated and currently have a value of $0 or $1. That's what happens in the space. If you think you're going to hit it for 6 every time, you'll be disappointed. You won't. You have to take a portfolio approach at it, as much as we love the individual companies. So what you can see from this is that I have overall, I have a 20% return in my 120% return in my portfolio unrealized. So for every dollar that I've invested, I'd get $2.20 back based on how the portfolio has gone. My internal rate of return is 25%, and I'm sitting on a 2 times plus return on my money. But look at this, look what's happened in the portfolio. We have 2 companies where I've lost all my money, and we have, where are they, the ROPs? We have ROP 1 and 2, where I have huge gains. If it wasn't for my investment in those 2, I would probably be underwater. So it highlights for you really graphically the importance of multiple investments, building a portfolio, shedding 1 or 2 tears, but not too many, because that's going to happen. You are going to lose money on some of these, and forging on, continuing to back the companies that are doing well, but try to keep within that 5 to 10% that you promised yourself, your wife, your family, that you were going to keep within, which is not always that easy. I don't keep as close an eye on how much I've invested as I should. And when my team put this together for me and I saw that number, I said, how in the hell did that happen? So, yes, it has happened quietly over time without me really noticing that much. I knew it was getting up there. So any questions on that?
So what's ROP?
ROP 1 and 2. I'm going to talk about Rocket when I talk about the companies. Rocket is the little red apple. Thank God for the little red apple. ROP 1 and ROP 2 are the orchard leasing partnerships that grow the apple in New Zealand. They are the largest growers of the apple in New Zealand. So when I tell the Rocket story, I'll touch on why we did that.
So it's, those 2 are similar to the Rocket Global then?
Yes, but interestingly, now Rocket Global's done incredibly well, and I'll talk about that in a second. But you look and you go, I thought he said did incredibly well. He's invested $20,000, but the value is $20,000. That's because I invested it at the last round. The valuation increase has already occurred. However, because private equity firms have come in and bought out the founder, and they're certainly looking for a return on their money, I'm thinking it's going to go, again, big time. So, so I invested in Rocket Global, the core company itself, as well as being invested in ROPs 1 and 2, and let's just hope apples go well, because if they don't, I might be standing up here telling you all, don't invest in early stage companies. Absolutely not.
You said you've been going 10 years, and you keep saying unrealised returns.
Yep.
Is there a indication of from the startup to exit for those that are successful? Is there an indication how long it's likely to take?
Yep.
Because then that becomes unrealised.
Yep.
Loss.
Yeah, we used to hear and hope that it was sort of 3 to 5 to 7 years, and now we're pushing that out a bit, and the Americans are as well, and they've been at it for 10 years longer than us. So every company is different. We're starting to get some really good engagement now. Half a dozen of our companies have achieved post-angel funding in the past 6 months. In other words, venture capital firms, private equity, or others have invested in the companies and are now taking them forward and invested millions and millions in these companies. So that's a really good sign. Because, as I mentioned, Enterprise Angels has been going 10 years. I've been investing 6 or 7, but I've been involved the whole time. Most of the investments that you see up here, the oldest one would be Rocket, which was 2011 when we originally invested in that one. So that's only 6 years. That's only 6 years. So it's the youth of the investments that's certainly one of the reasons why we haven't achieved more realized returns. And they do take time to get into that. It's not a short-term investment.
Is it a fair question to ask you which ones you're excited about on that list?
Thank you, yes. Let's see. I'm excited about Beanie because that's I regard that as a dividend play, which is great to have in the portfolio, and Bruce might touch on that a little bit later. EA Fund One's got some really interesting companies in it. Fuel 50, I just say this because unfortunately it's uncommon, but the two female founders, entrepreneurs, they are wonderful. They are getting fantastic traction in the U.S. It's HR software, which they provide to major corporates to enable people within those corporates to find career paths within IBM, within Procter & Gamble, rather than feeling like they have to jump out of the corporate to advance their career. So they're doing really well. They just got investment from 2 US VCs, 2 million US in that one. Green Button, that's the one I realized. That we invested in that, and 19 months later it exited to Microsoft for 25 million plus, and I 3.5 times return on my money in that one in a really short period of time. Ooh, the IRR on that would be pretty cool. Let's see where else. Rocket, of course, I am definitely really excited about that. Tetchin, I was the investor director of for 3 years, and that's just raised $4 million post-angel funding. Really excited about where that can go. It's an imaging technology that enables anyone to image a biological sample rather than having to transport it to a lab for analysis. So it's got massive applications in humans as well as in animals. Gates Foundation funding, trialing in Ethiopia. So it's a really exciting company. Okay, I'll keep moving along. So to talk about some of the specific companies, I've got three war stories to share. And right off the bat, not avoiding the punches, you'll have seen Balex was one of my zeros up there. Let's talk a bit about Balex. This one does hurt. It's a very close, this one is very closely associated with Tauranga. I think about 60 Enterprise Angels members were invested in this company. Look, we knew that we were taking a risk. We are obviously risk takers. Investing in a company that manufactures, that first of all invented, then developed and manufactures a product like this, which sits on a trailer and will automatically pull the boat up onto the trailer, so no winching required. Most angel investors, early stage investors, invest in IT only or predominantly. And the reason for that is you can take a couple of bright people, young people usually, stick them in the corner with laptops, and they can come up with the next whatever. And what does that cost you? So it's very popular because it's low capital cost and it has extreme scalability. Manufacturing, however, high capital costs, and therefore doesn't leave a lot of room for mistakes, errors, changes. What we invest in, the companies that we invest in, they have all those things because they're very young. They haven't proven out everything they're going to be doing yet. So in the case of Balex Marine, to summarize it, and I'll talk in a little bit more detail, but to summarize it, we just decided we just couldn't continue to fund the company, and it was going to need a lot more money than we were going to be able to provide. So a lesson which we knew going into it, but again we've learned through 2 companies now that were both manufacturers. You really got to make sure that that you've got it right before you go into market. You really have to make sure you have the product right, and you really have to make sure you have the customers identified and that they will pay the price for the product because there's not a lot of room to duck and dive and pivot when you've got raw materials, stock sitting on the shelf, and and a -0 bank balance. So the strong points of Balex Marine, a lot of it's all about this. It's anybody who sees it just goes, Jesus, that's beautiful, that's great, that is a really great device, and what an application. It's got such application. There's nothing else in the world like it. On the other side, where did we go wrong? Well, the company missed the first summer season in New Zealand. It then had some further product refinements that were required that caused it to get a delayed start in the second summer season. And at that point, they realized the trailer manufacturers, who were their main target for adapting these onto, putting them onto, they needed to have the product well before Balex was ready to supply it to them. So we missed some of a second season. Brexit happened. The main distributor was in the UK. The exchange rate went like that. The product was just unviable to sell. The margin disappeared in that exchange rate drop. A major order from Korea was canceled, which was a well over $100,000 order at a really critical moment. One of the challenges you have with these companies is this isn't General Motors. The contract that you have with someone purchasing the product, there's only so far you can go in terms of getting them to guarantee and pay ahead when you're a young company and they're willing to take it into Korea and help to establish it in that country. So yeah, so that's some of the challenges and lessons that we learned from it. We still are bullish on real products. We don't want to simply be investing in IT. We think New Zealand can do this, but we've learned a lot, and we're going to apply that to the next one. And it's been taken out of liquidation. One of the parties that was a supplier to the company bought it out of liquidation for not much. I haven't seen the number yet, but and they're attempting to carry it on now.
I was just going to ask along similar lines. Presumably, there's good IP in how you actually came up with the product, and there's a lesson learned that maybe you need to earlier look to an industry partner or something.
Yep.
Like that.
You know, that could be the lesson that we learn out of manufacturing, which is don't try to manufacture it. Design, IP, and then seek a licensed partner that manufactures and get a royalty off the invention. We'd be highly attracted to that approach. Okay, happier times. We'll move on to something else. Rocket Global. Why has this company been so successful? That's a really important question for us all to ask. Originally invested in back in 2011, Phil Allison, who was the founder of the company, approached Enterprise Angels. Phil had been an exporter and an apple grower for 20 years. He really knew not only how to grow apples, he really knew the market for them. Phil had been hanging around Prevar, which is crop and food, where they're constantly, New Zealand is the leader in the world in new apple varieties. Don't know if you knew that, we are. So he was keeping an eye on what they were coming up with at Prevar, and he caught wind of this little red apple that they had ended up creating. Not genetically modified, this is all natural genetic breeding stuff. And he asked them about it, and they said, well, the scientists said, well, we got this apple, it's got great growing qualities, amazing growing qualities, and taste, and also keeping qualities. It's just a wonderful apple. The only problem with it is it's so small. I mean, the apple will go down to golf ball size naturally, and up to sort of like about that size. And the beauty of an apple that grows naturally that size is it's not coming off a tree that's got a problem, and that's why the apples are small, and then the apples don't taste very well. That's the natural size of the apple. So it's a beautiful apple in every regard. So Phil said to them, knowing the markets very well, said, yeah, really, you probably just want to breathe this one into something else and get those qualities going. But look, if you don't mind, I'll take a worldwide commercialization license off you, and I'll see if I can do something. And Prevar is interested because they get a royalty, just like Zespri does off the sale of gold, kiwi fruit. And he did. Now Phil knew very well what he was doing. He had wanted for many years to take an apple out of the produce section and put it in the snack aisle. when Mom goes down the snack aisle and she sees rocket apples and she sees chips and candies and all the rest of it, what's Mom want to get for the kids? She wants to get those. And what do the kids want? Those are their sized apples. Those special little apples. The kids want them as well. Now, Mom just paid over $20 a kilo for the apples. Mom doesn't care because she's going to spend $5 on a candy bar anyway. So everybody's happy. The kids are happy, Mom's happy, and we're happy as investors in the company too. So this is the idea that Phil had, and this is what Rocket has become. Now, how did it get from a grower and exporter? Phil has his skill set, and Phil has now been bought out of the company. The private equity firms that came in bought Phil out of the company. How did we get the company from 2011 to today, where it has gone up in value almost 10 times? That was the team that we put around the company. We had an absolutely fit for purpose team. We had the legal advisor who had the lawyer who had done all of the legal work to develop the gold variety of kiwi fruit around the world, all the licensing agreements, all the plant variety right work, all of that. We had that person as an investor and a director in the company. We had the company that is one of the main horticulture packaging companies in New Zealand. It is about packaging. They were major investors in the company and also sat on the board. We had one of the most experienced horticulture orchard management companies in the Bay of Plenty. He's a major investor. He was on the board. He knew about horticulture crops in the Bay of Plenty. We're talking about apples in Hawke's Bay. Not a problem. He just could apply his skill set directly over there. So we put together a fantastic team of very, very knowledgeable people who were able to take the company forward very, very quickly with growers around the world and markets around the world now as well. So in your local New World, definitely you can see them in New World now. We have enough apples that we can supply at least some in New Zealand. And the ROP partnerships that I mentioned before, being from the Bay of Plenty, we thought the growers are going to do incredibly well out of this, the first growers of the apple. Why don't we be the growers of the apple? So we own 100 hectares, I think it's hectares, not acres, hectares. 100 hectares of apple orchard leases in the Hawke's Bay, where we are the major New Zealand growers of the apple. So it's been a great success story thus far. And
Bill, on the numbers, you got valuation 500, EA investment 496 and 46 million. So obviously there's something.
when it's 46 billion, yeah.
Yeah. So up there you've got a EA investment of 496,000.
That was the original round.
Yeah.
We need to update that. There were some subsequent rounds. They were always invested in by the existing shareholders. It didn't until just now, it didn't come back out for Enterprise Angels members to invest in again. I think that number would have definitely been below 5 million. Was it 4, Jim? 4 million. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Yeah. So that was what I was looking
yeah. So they did a fantastic job of building that company. And last but not least, Green Button. I mentioned I need to talk about one of our realized return companies. So Scott Houston, and for those that, the national support is still out there. For those that aren't happy about the government giving tax breaks to film producers and people like that, there's a great example of something that came directly out of Weta Digital and Peter Jackson's work in Wellington. This company came right out of there. And the reason it came out of there was Scott Houston was the CTO for Weta Digital, and Weta had a problem, and that was, he's working with Peter Jackson. No, that was that they had huge requirements for processing data, but only in bursts. And so they had to make a decision. Are we going to buy a huge amount of servers that'll sit idle 85% of the time, and then we fire them up to render this next battle scene that happens? That just doesn't seem like a smart way to go about it at all. There must be other people that have this issue too. And so Scott left Weta Digital, and he set up a company to try to address this issue, and that finally developed into Green Button. And to put it really simply, if you have a big data project that you need to process, let's say you're a climate scientist, you know, what you'd have to do is you'd have to set your computer aside for the weekend, and it would just grind through the whole thing for a weekend, and you might get a result at the end of that. Or what you can do is you can press the green button on your computer, and you can send that huge data project to Amazon servers or one of the big server networks around the world for it to be processed for you, returning the result much, much faster than you'd be able to do yourself. And you don't have to go and buy all that server capacity yourself. So Microsoft, Dell, they were in discussions with a whole range of different companies. All of them could see how important it was, not only for small to medium-sized businesses, but also for them, because they have underutilized server capacity, and they're trying to find ways to draw more businesses into using their big servers that they've spent so much money on. So it was a trade sale to Microsoft, May of 2014, as it says there. They've never disclosed it, but I know, and I mean, it's not helpful when companies have a really good outcome and then they can't say anything about it. So it was 25 million plus is what they got. The founder, Scott, he would have had well over a 10 times return on his investment and the early investors in it as well.
Was there much IP around that?
Yeah. Actually, I can't say for sure. Yeah, I can't say for sure. And I don't, this was one of these opportunities where it came to us, and there's another one, Neariad. We don't know what the heck they do. To be frank, we're just hoping they do. No, we've had enough due diligence done from others. And Scott Houston's one of them, actually. Scott does. I think Scott sits on the Neariad board. A Cambridge company that's doing something. What was I going to say about Green Button? Oh, right. So what it does. No, it was one of those examples where we didn't really understand the technology, and some of you might think, then why did you invest in it? And that's a valid question. What we did understand was the people that were involved. And we really liked the people that were involved. We really rated them a lot, and we invested in them. And the reason that this company was able to exit was Marcel van den Assem, who was the chair of Green Button. Actually, he was just a director of Green Button. He took it upon himself to achieve an exit. And that man, over probably a 2-year period, he must have made 50 trips to the States. Incredible. He had that many people looking at this opportunity, and he was working one against the other, and finally they got to a point of getting Microsoft to make the decision. Right, so that's the war stories, some of them. There's 65 others that we could talk about, but then we'd be here for days. So why don't we take a little break in me talking. I'm going to ask Bruce to come up the front, because I wanted to give you an opportunity to hear from someone other than me about some of the aspects of being involved in the early stage market. And those are things like being the director of an early stage company and what that's like. And also being an entrepreneur, inventor, director, and developer. Not IT developer, though he's the director of a couple of IT companies. Land development as well. So Bruce, if you're comfortable.
Sure. Hi everybody. I don't know how I ended up with this job. But
someone has to do it.
Tapped me on the shoulder and said, come and help me out here.
So I'm going to ask Bruce a question, and he's going to respond. So that
the views will be my own. They will not necessarily be the views of Enterprise Angels.
Whatever those views are. So, Bruce, you've been an investor in and a director of a whole range of companies there. Some of them a bit more established now, beyond the early stage space, others earlier. What do you think are some of the keys to effectively managing and being a director of these early stage companies?
Governance on the startup companies is quite different to governance on large and public and corporate companies. With the large corporate ones, it seems to me, with a company like Air New Zealand, say, there's a bunch of professional directors there, and they decide where they want to take the company, and they look for a CEO with the right skill set. They advertise, they find, they get, they put them in place, they support him, it all runs. If he doesn't deliver on the KPIs, then they have to swap them out. That's their job. With these angel-backed companies, you're really betting on the people, and you've got a founder there, and the founder will be 3/4 of the business, with their personality and their drive and their way of being. It's their mission, which we're all trying to help and do well ourselves in the process. You always go through an interesting phase where, to start with, the founder is the whole thing. It's them, and the egos can really run amok here because it's them. And as they go on, they get a bunch of helpers, a big bunch of helpers, and including senior people who come in as mentors. And so, but on all of this, the founder, as the entrepreneur, is still running their show. They're in charge. They're the boss, and they've got these helpers and these mentors who are saying this and that. When they come to an angel round and this other investment comes in, then there's a governance board established. There always is, because I don't like investing unless there is. And at this point, there's always a bit of a power battle going on between who's in charge of this company. Is it the directors, the board collectively deciding this is what we're going to do? Or is it the entrepreneur? And very often there's a bit of pushing and shoving while that gets sorted out. But the thing is, unlike the Air New Zealand model, if they aren't performing, sometimes you just plain can't boot them out. There's too much of it. They're too important to the company. So it's like a marriage. You're there, you've got to find a way to make it work. And it's very bad for everybody if the thing flies apart. So governance with startup companies is much more about personalities than it is about numbers, and it's much more of an art than a science, would be my view, and we don't always get it right.
Yeah.
But it's great fun.
It is great fun.
It's great fun when you're winning.
Yeah, there's some war stories to tell within being the director of a early stage company, but maybe we'll talk about those over drinks. In general, Bruce, I know you and I have talked a number of times before about this early stage investing, and I think one of the things that we've sometimes been guilty of is investing in moonshot companies. So investing in companies that are highly, highly risky, and it's kind of a binary outcome. They're either going to reach the moon or they're not. And if you have only those kind of companies in your portfolio, that's probably not a healthy mix. It pays to have some other types of companies. So Bruce and I have had this conversation a number of times. Bruce, talk about your view on the approach that you take with you took with Spidertracks, and that you're now taking with iFly and Beanie to get this all-important financial return.
Okay, so I'll share my heretical views, if I may. I was living in the States for a while, 2010, 2011, living in Boulder in Colorado, which is one of the tech centers. And I saw the angel stuff happening there full time, and they would have these amazing weeks like the Boulder Ignite Startup Week, and all these rich fellas would fly in from the West Coast and the East Coast, and they would all be in this place in Boulder, and there was huge money happening there. And the situation there was that there's a big ceiling of buyers who are the big companies, Microsoft, Google, Yahoo, are these guys, and they've got big numbers of clients, and if they can find a software product they can sell to those clients for an extra $1 or $2 a month, that's worth a lot to them. So at the bottom of the the scale is these students, kids, the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, who played away in their dorm rooms, and on their computer they've got a new gizmo which adds a little thingy onto LinkedIn or something like that. Some little thing that's really just a program in a computer. What's it worth? The banks will say it's worth nothing. But within 2 or 3 years, it could be sold to these guys up here for 20 mil. So what's it worth down here? You've got to sort of run your valuation backwards based on, look, it's going to be worth 20 mil then, so maybe it's worth something now. And I saw these guys, these rich guys, would drop $1 million on these kids just because they like the look of the kid. And I thought this might work. It sort of looked a little like horse racing to me. But, and the way they were going to win was by betting on every horse in the race. So they had to get the winner. But what happened there, the closest thing I've seen to it here, and it's a bit of a standout, is your green button one. And that actually did sell to Microsoft. And that happened in a short period. You guys were in and out in 2 years, right? So what happens for those American companies, it's quick and short, it's software based, because only the software companies can accelerate that fast. A company that makes stuff or grows stuff can't accelerate that fast. It comes up each year, but it can't go pow 20 times up in a year. Yep. So they tended to be just those software companies. The failure rate was horrendous, but it was a very dynamic space. I only observed it. I wasn't trying to be in there. I went at the company Spidertracks. We were running there in America at that time. But when I came back to New Zealand and I got in touch with Enterprise Agent, and I looked at what was happening here, and I said, look, that you can't just take that American model and apply that to the New Zealand economy, especially if it's a business that requires something to be built, because manufacturing cannot grow that fast. So it doesn't mean that these New Zealand sort of companies that are growing stuff or making stuff, it doesn't mean that they're bad investments, but don't expect them to be like the American software plays, going kapow in 2 years. And change your expectation, expect that it's going to run over 5 or 7 or 10 years. And when it's running over 5 or 7 or 10 years, a whole lot of new stuff comes up. Well, you've got to have succession plans, you've got to building a business steadily. Americans aren't worried about building a business, they're just going kapow. No business needs to be built, there's only half a dozen guys in a room. You know? So a whole lot of stuff becomes different in New Zealand. It's the American one is nothing's happening until the exit. I believe in the New Zealand mode with a longer, slower growth, there's other things that can happen. You can generate your own exit. I sort of did that with Spidertracks. And so while it's not in this space, it's not completely illiquid. I don't believe that you're stuck there until there's the exit. And as you said, with a fund, people can trade in the fund, and the company shares can be bought and sold in these little companies. So does that help?
That's good.
So
Yeah, that's great.
That's a different view, but what I have found is that view works. At least it's worked for the companies that I've been involved with. And you know, you're only as good as your last screw up. But so far, everything's going okay. I think with this investment space, it's business and it's evolution of business and it's business building. Every inventor thinks that their idea is where the money is, and they're terrified that someone's going to steal their idea. And they want you to sign an NDA and bolt it all down because you might steal their idea and you'll make the millions instead of them. But I think in the angel space, the view is quite different. The idea is simply the gate. The idea is this good enough to have a business built on it or not? Is it too reliant on this? Is it too thin in this way? Is it too likely to get wiped out in that way? So the thing is the idea good enough? And the idea is good enough, okay, let's have a look. So then it comes to, can these people make a business out of it? So the skill and where the money is, where the money's created, is in the ability to develop a business. It's business creation. It's built on an idea, but it's the business creation. And you can't get an NDA on that because it's multifaceted and it goes over quite a bit of time. So from an investment point of view, if I'm looking at a new angel thing, that goes through my head. Is the idea good enough? Yes, no. If it's no, okay, good luck, but it's not me. If the idea is, yep, I think this could be done, and then it comes to, can these people pull it off? So, shall I talk about that, or do you want to ask another question?
No, that's good, and then we'll wrap it up.
Okay. So when you're looking at the people, these journeys of building a business, it's more like the Lord of the Rings. People start out, hey, we've got the ring, hey, we're going to stick it in the volcano. It'll be great. Let's go, we'll have this team, off we go. And they don't get very far before they're lost in the Mirkwood Forest, or they're stuck in a swamp, and they're got the sea of orcs all over them. And, you know, do they pull it off? If, all of these changes happening, and over 7 years, all sorts of stuff happen. People get divorced, people get remarried, competitors come, industries change, all sorts of things can happen. So what you're looking for is a team that is going to be resolute, have grit, not give up, because headwinds are going to come, and that'll be able to, when they're stuck in the swamp, get themselves out of the swamp, get themselves around the swamp, and keep going in the direction of the mountain. So it's looking for those characters. They're not flash in the pan geniuses, they're the heart grafters who won't give up. It's a key attribute. I think of it as business building. In New Zealand right now, there's a lot of very good business building happening. I've had a lucky run. I hope to continue to have a lucky run, and had very good returns and heaps of fun. So I've learned a lot by working with the bright young things.
Great, thanks, Bruce. Excellent.
Am I excused?
You are. I'm just going to wrap up with one more slide, and then we'll open it up to questions. So for Tracy, Bruce, or myself, we're happy to take some questions before we finish up and have some drinks. So, to sum up, we've learned a lot. You can hear from someone like Bruce. There's other Enterprise Angels members in the room. There's myself. We've learned a lot, and we've learned through successes as well as failures. It's a better time to come in as an early stage investor than it was 10 years ago, because we have learned a lot, and because you can come in and you can invest in companies we've already invested in that have been through some of those orc fields and other things, and have come out and are more de-risked, not entirely de-risked, but more de-risked. So there's a lot more investment opportunities around now that are less risky than there were when we started. And as I mentioned before, if you're thinking about and you're thinking, yeah, this sounds really interesting, I'd really like to put some money into this space, then as I mentioned before, there's 3 ways you can do it. You can do it passively by investing in a fund. You can do it direct by an online platform like Angel Equity, where you can be choosing your own investment opportunities. Or you can do it actively, as I describe it, by joining an angel group and being involved in the angel group. To join an angel group, Enterprise Angels, is $350 plus just a year. So it's not like it's a huge amount of money, and so that's one of the options up there. So with that, any questions, comments, thoughts? As we wrap up, got a slide, you have questions? I do.
Now, do you see the funds, so for early guys like myself, where I've been involved for about a year or something like that, the funds are a way of de-risking because you're actually getting an investment in 15 companies as you sort of build. So does that sort of fit? Is that the reason for the fund, or why is the fund there?
Yeah, from an EA member's point of view, that's the main benefit of the fund. Is let's say you think, okay, 5% of my wealth that I put into the space is $200,000, right? Well, with an investment of $30,000 or $60,000 into the fund, then you've got a very good portfolio spread of 20 companies. EA Fund 2 will be 20 companies. And you also have some money set aside that you can invest in things possibly that the fund doesn't invest in, or you can invest in things the fund does, but it's because it's something you really know yourself, an industry that you're familiar with, or you really, really like this deal, you can invest your own personal money directly into that investment opportunity. So as an angel member, it gives you both those things. You've got that instant portfolio over a period of a couple of years. It builds up. You have a portfolio. And you can also be investing in things directly yourself. And you can be investing at follow-on in the companies that are doing well. You may not invest in the initial round, the fund might, you keep an eye on it, and then you might invest in later rounds. So it's, from an Enterprise Angels member point of view, that's how I view how the fund works and with being a member.
You mentioned the Enterprise Angels rounds 1, 2, 3. Do you advertise for a round of funding at particular periods then?
Yeah, to keep from driving ourselves and everyone else completely crazy, our funds open and then they close, so they're not open all the time. If they were open all the time, then we'd have people coming in at different stages, we'd have to revalue the fund all the time. So the fund typically is open for 3 to 4 months for investment. And EA Fund 3, because EA Fund 2 will be moving through its investments and will have invested in about 15 companies by early 2018. We'll be looking to launch EA Fund 3 early in 2018.
Who's managing the funds?
Thank you for asking. Enterprise Angels staff manages the funds on behalf of the limited partners. So yes, so we do. Enterprise Angels is a unique model of angel group in New Zealand. My board and I, 5 or 6 years ago, decided we weren't going to try and do this as volunteers. We were going to build a team. We were going to do this professionally. So we have 4 staff. We have a full team. We have a nominee company, which everyone invests through. We have 2 funds. We have the online platform, Angel Equity, and we have almost 70 investments and 150 members. So there's a lot to be done, and the team is fantastic. They've learned a huge amount, and they're a real asset for all of us. Yep. So they manage the funds.
But there's an investment committee, though, isn't there?
What's that?
There's an investment committee as well for the fund.
That's right. Yeah. So the funds have an investment committee that makes the decision on what the fund invests in. As I mentioned before, the best form of validation, better than the due diligence that venture capital companies do and others, the best form of validation as to whether or not this is a good investment opportunity to invest in is the due diligence that we do, but also the fact that no matter what industry sector an investment opportunity comes out of, we have people with deep experience and expertise in that industry sector who have worked 10, 20, 30 years sometimes in the industry sector. If they really believe in the opportunity and if they're investing, that sends a strong signal to everyone else in the group, and that's the kind of signal that the fund investment committee takes in order to make its investment decision. So the investment committee is guided by everything else that happens with the members and their investment decisions, and its primary role is to make sure that the portfolio of the fund is balanced. In other words, we don't have all IT companies or we don't have all manufacturers. That it's a balanced portfolio for the LPs. Yeah.
You talked about you've funded 70 companies that have obviously gone through a screening process. How many didn't make the cut to even get through to be potentially invested in by investors?
Yep, it's a really good question and a really important one. At any given time, the team is dealing with 10 to 20 companies. Of those, 4 or 5 are brought to the screening committee. Enterprise Angels has a screening committee that decides what companies pitch at the member meetings. And out of that, 1 to 2 to 3 of those companies are approved to pitch. And out of that, 75% of the companies that pitch go on to get funded. But to get to that point of being approved to pitch to us, it's a funnel. It really gets. So if we've invested in 70 companies, God, how many companies we've seen over the years? Thousands. Yeah.
So after the success of the pitch, there's no more due diligence.
The pitch is really the first step. If I was standing up here tonight pitching to you to invest in my company, you'd have sheets just like you do on your chairs. You would, as a member of Enterprise Angels, you'd fill in the sheet and you'd say, Yeah, that looks really interesting to me. An indicative amount that I would invest, $10,000, $15,000. And yes, I'll help on the due diligence team. So that's what you would do on the evening. Then we go, if we have enough member interest, we would then take it into due diligence. 6, 7, 8 members do the due diligence on the company. A couple of weeks of due diligence. Term negotiation is also done at the same time. You have to have our investor protective terms in there. We don't like your valuation, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. All that gets done. And then at the end of that, if the due diligence is positive, then we let all the members know, and that's only at that point do we take investments in the company. It goes through that whole process.
And sorry, and at that point, it's then thrown open to all of the enterprise members, the fund, and everyone can invest on an equal basis at that point.
That's right. So those that indicated on their forms that they wanted to invest, the team goes back to them. But we also let all other members know through the Angel Equity platform, that we use that for all of our communications. We let all other members know it was a positive due diligence. We've got $150,000, $200,000 committed for this one. It's only going to be open for another 10 days. Here's all the documentation. Here's the shareholders agreement. Here's the term sheet. Here's the due diligence summary report. Here's everything you need to be able to look through and make an informed decision about whether this is an investment opportunity for you. Yeah, so all that's made available. Okay, great. I won't keep us any longer. Really appreciate your attention. Hope you enjoy the evening. I want to really thank Tracy as well for her contribution, and also to Bruce for being willing to come up the front. Please stay with us, have a drink, and we'll have more of a chat.